The Flashpoint Xplor 600. We got a lot to talk about, a lot to get into, a beautiful model to help us show what it can do. Let's get right into it. You already know there's a sync selection in the description below. There's also affiliate links to all the products used in this video.
The Flashpoint Xplor 600 is one of my favorite flashes. Here we have the LCD screen. You can't really see it in sunlight, so there's that. You also have your buttons here, your button layout, battery back here. As you can see here, we have the diffusion dish that comes with the unit. Kind of wobbly, kind of noisy. I wish it wouldn't be like that, but pretty much when you put something on here, it's pretty solid. Usually I have like 60-inch umbrellas on here, 30, 40-inch umbrellas on here, so I'm not afraid of anything falling off. But one thing I'm afraid of is all the noise. And another thing that really bothers me about this unit is the yoking system here. When you're using this rotary knob or this knob that goes around in circles, it makes this notchy sound because it stops at notches. Well, that's a bit of an issue with this unit. And when you tighten it up, it makes this cringy like noise and it sounds like a cheap device, but this thing can really do a lot. This part of the device is actually extremely sturdy. Trust me, I've dropped this quite a few times. Not only does this dish make a lot of rattling noises, but also all the other modifiers that you could possibly get because of how this mounting system was made. Now, it's a Boeing's mount, yes, but it has a lot of loose space and it makes you feel like you have a cheap device. So this is one thing that annoys me. Also, another thing that annoys me even more, when you go to rotate this yoking system, this rotating knob here, when you loosen it up, it has this notchy thing going on here. It's not a smooth transition. It's more like a bumpy transition. I wish Flashpoint would have fixed that. They did in the Pro model, but still, it's very dangerous for the unit to be notchy like that because, let me take off the dish here. When you take off this dish, you have this exposed flash tube. Now this flash tube, you're supposed to touch it with some gloves, so I know YouTube is gonna get on me if I pull this out with my bare hands. But this is a friction mounted type of light. So all you gotta do is take it out. You don't have any kind of lock, you don't have any kind of security for this $100 flash tube. And so when you have this on, and then you start to adjust it with this knob, well, that flash tube on the inside starts to get loose. And once it starts to get loose, you don't know how loose it is because this is really blocking the flash tube. There's nothing to keep that flash tube from falling out. So once you go to pull this out, that friction mounted flash tube can just slide out. And you're like, oh my goodness, my flash tube is on the ground. Next thing you know, it breaks, $100 flash tube. Now, I know a lot of cheaper units have the flash tube soldered into the unit, but Flashpoint, I think you could have done a little bit of a better job in ensuring that this flash tube doesn't come out. You also have the protection cover that comes with this. Ironically, this does not come with the extension head of the 1200B, and we're gonna talk about that in another video, but you can take this off. You can put the protection cover over it, and that's great. Now, it will not keep your flash tube from sliding out in transit. So if you're in a car or anything like that, your flash tube is rattling and shaking because your car shakes, it's going to eventually slide that flash tube out of its little slot, and it's going to end up in this little cup. It's going to end up in that little cup if you're lucky. If you're not lucky and it's loose enough to when you start to mount something on it and it just falls out, well, you're in bad shape because it ends up falling on the ground, cracking, breaking, so on and so forth. But these are the only gripes I have about the build quality of this unit. If you understand what the flaws are in the build quality of this unit with this flash tube and the way it's mounted, the weak Bowen's reflector mounting system, and this notchy yoke system that can actually pull out your flash tube without you knowing it, then you'll be ready to use this. Now, here's some tips and tricks that I use for this Flashpoint 600 that keeps me good and golden. So when I'm using the Flashpoint Xplor, I know the flash tube might wiggle out. I know that there are several things about it that's not good. So when I use my Flashpoint Xplor 600, what I do is when I put it in the case, I put it in the case like this, in this position, where it's facing upward and that this yoking system is facing downward, like it's close up to the system. So when you pull it out, you're automatically going to put it on a stand like this. This keeps gravity on your side. It keeps your flash tube from falling out, and it kind of gives you a decent mounting point. You don't have to mount a modifier on here like this, but what you can do is ensure that your flash tube, your $100 and change flash tube, doesn't fall out, and bang, it's in there. And then you can take maybe a cloth or something like that, or a glove, and just push it in its place, because usually it's like halfway out, a quarter of the way out. You want to make sure it's nice and secure, so when you go and you lock that modifier in place, that your flash tube doesn't fall out on it. Another thing that I don't really like about this unit is this battery signal indicator. Now, as you can see, here is the battery signal indicator. Now, this battery signal indicator is good when you're charging it. Say, for example, it's in the case and you're charging it, you just hit this button to see how much battery life you have, or if it's continuing charging. But if you're using this, chances are, if you're using the Flashpoint Xplor 600, that you're using it on a light stand. You're going to raise it all the way up. Now guess what? You're looking up at your unit and you can't see the battery life. And depending on how high you have it, like I can barely see it here in the sunlight, and I'm only like 2 feet, maybe a foot and a half away from it, and I still can't see the battery signals. So I'm looking at the bottom here, and I'd say, hey, I don't know how this thing is designed, but it might be a better idea to put the battery indicator on the bottom of the unit. And the reason why is because you can only mount this on a light stand. And light stands pretty much indicate that you're gonna raise this unit up, have it at certain angles in which the top part is never gonna be seen. So since the Flashpoint Xplor is now high in the sky because you have it on a light stand, you can't see the battery power. Now, one of the big claims to fame for this unit is its battery life. So you might be saying, oh, well, I got all the battery power I need. I'm gonna go out here and do what I need to do to get the shoot done and not even think about the battery power. And even though that's what, 99% true for most of the occasions, that 1% as a professional is not a 1% that you can afford. So if that battery life goes down without you knowing it, you're in bad shape. And a lot of people don't want to be charging it and using it at the same time, because chances are you're going to have this on a light stand. And if this is on a light stand and if you're charging it, the charging port is up here. The charging port is up here, and so when you go to charge it, and I don't even know if you can use this unit while it's charging, and I don't even know how effective that would be over a long period of time. So those are some of the things you need to think about. Also, there is a battery extension for this, so you can buy a battery extender that makes this into AC power, and that has a longer cable, so if you do run out of battery power, you can change that. You can also buy different batteries for this, so you're not in the, you're not in the blue yet. But these are some of the things to think about when you're buying this unit. Is even though it has a battery indicator here at the top, I want to say 75% of the time you just can't, or even 95% of the time, you can't even see it while you're shooting. So another thing that I'm not a fan of is this optical slaving unit. Let me show you. This red part of the Flashpoint Xplor 600 is pretty much your optical slaving unit, or this is pretty much its eyes. This is what would have to see another flash for it to flash. Does that make sense? That's how optical slave works. Basically, this flash is looking for another flash, and then when it sees it fire, it will fire. It's pretty instantaneous and it's a pretty good system, but this one is not so much, because the optical slaving unit on this thing can't really see much. Like it's not actually able to see much. Based on the design of this and where they place the optical slave unit, it's up here at the top. And if it can't see another flash, then it won't flash. Well, typically, when you're flashing someone, your flash is either gonna be this way, and if you're using a reflective umbrella, your optical slave unit is gonna be towards your subject. But Most of the time, when you have a Bowens mount, you're going to be using those Bowens mount modifiers, which means that this optical slave is not going to be able to see any other flashes around it because it's so far from the actual place where it's not even facing the same direction where another flash would be. Another caveat here is the screen. Now we're outside where a lot of people are going to be using this because it's a wireless flash. I can't really see the screen outside. I mean, it works. And if you have a trigger that has the readings on it, it's not that big of an issue, but as far as the screen right now, I can't really see it. I don't know if that's a big turn on to a lot of people because there's no reason for you to be able to see the screen when you raise it up in the air. And most people know that they're gonna raise it up in the air. They're not gonna be able to see the screen in general, but that makes it that much more important to get a good enough remote in what you're gonna use to trigger this flash. So here is the Flashpoint R2 Pro 2 trigger. I think this is the latest one they have on the market. It has a nice screen. Even in sunlight, I can see it. So that's a redeeming factor. I think this has kind of a redundant button layout, but it works perfectly fine. This is not the one you're going to get with the unit if you buy the unit with this. This is just an upgrade that I had to get because someone broke the original one that I had that came with this unit when I was on a gig, so on and so forth. I'm not gonna get all into that. I haven't had any issues with it. It has like this locking situation right here. Really good, locks on a hot shoe really well. The only issue with this remote and all Flashpoint remotes, and I think this goes for Godox remotes too, or Godox, however you say it, the battery door. The battery door is one of the worst battery doors I have ever seen in my life. So take it with a grain of salt, guys. The battery doors are horrible on it, but the unit is pretty good. It's pretty durable. I haven't had any issues with it, even walking around events, walking past people. Usually when you have things hanging off your camera, like triggers and flashes, that you bump into people with them, and that is a test of the endurance of the flash. As a matter of fact, I've bumped into so many surfaces and tables with my flashes and my remotes that sit on top of my camera that's probably one of the biggest tests of durability that I have to tell you, and it does an awesome job.
So now we have the Flashpoint Xplor 600 outside in what I like to think its natural habitat. But no, the 600 is an amazing flash to use outside. And as you can see from my ninja footage that's attached to my R5 while I'm shooting to show you what I'm actually doing, you can tell that the sun is very, very high in the sky. It's like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. The sun might be trying to go down at this point, but it's still pretty high in the sky, not providing good lighting conditions. A lot of times you might want to get into the shade. This will help out your flash a lot. Getting in the shade will help even out your lighting situations, because even though you might be able to overpower the sun if you raise your ISO and bring the light closer, it's not always guaranteed that you will beat the sun in certain spots, especially if you're under the trees. It'll create this dappled lighting effect and it won't be as controlled as you want it to be. So even though you can't see the flash firing in this B-roll coming from my R5, you can actually see that the flash is flashing when I show you the pictures here. So if you look at some of the pictures, you can tell how I'm using the flash and using my environment to help direct the sunlight away from the model's face and only make it hit the background. The Flashpoint Xplor is not the end-all be-all to flashes, so that means don't put all the onus on the power of this flash to overpower the sun. Use your mind as a photographer, as a creative. Use the light that you have, not only the flash, but actually the sun, to make a good image. Put the sun in a place that makes your background illuminate. Put the sun in the wake of the image, which makes a creative sun flare. Put it somewhere where you don't have to necessarily worry about all the different aspects. Now that you have enough power to compete with it, use it to your advantage now. And I use that in this image, a lot of these images, to get that nice green shrubbery that makes it really, really nice and vibrant. Also know what time of day you're shooting if you're shooting the Flashpoint Explorer 600. And you can also, like I said before, use your ISO values to actually bring up the amount of light that you are seeing from your flash, and then raise your shutter speed to bring down the ambient light. This will help balance our exposures out a little bit more in the favor of the Flashpoint Explorer 600. Now, to do this review, I had to use the Flashpoint Explorer 600 for hours on end. So I had to raise my ISO values, and you'll see that later in the video where I show you the actual exposures that I'm using and getting on these images. Now, you can see it as I show you in the B-roll, but just pay attention to the video and see some of the techniques that I use to incorporate the sun. Like here, you can see a rim light, hair light, all these different aspects of utilizing the sun to not overbear the face and the mask of the subject. Moving the Flashpoint around was not hard at all until she got into the sparkly dress, and I used the 1200B along with the 60-inch softbox from Glow. It was really hard to move it. As a matter of fact, I did not want to move it at all because they only give you like 2 little bags to put the Flashpoint Explorers in, and then the head that goes on top of the light stand. So it's very impractical to try to move that 1200 head extension around and to try to get a bigger modifier and put more power through it, and the power wasn't yielding the results, and it wasn't being a fair trade for all the inconveniences of moving it around. Now we're in the studio. Now the studio is a little bit different on settings. Now instead of doing the settings that I like to outside, which are high-speed sync settings, high shutter speed, wide aperture, low f-stop number like 2.8, 1.8, and a low ISO. Now we're going into the studio where we'll take some creative concepts where we have to make the entire scene. Now I don't spend a lot of time with my scene in this one. This is just to show you guys exactly what it can do, but I'm not using the same settings. So we got 1/200th of a second, and then we got somewhere around ISO 100, and I might have amped the ISO up a little bit so my flashes don't have to work so hard because I'm using them the entire day non-stop. But that's not something you probably will experience. So if you want lower ISOs like ISO 400, 200, 100, you can probably pull that off with these strobes. As a matter of fact, I know you can pull it off with these strobes in the studio to get low noise and that magazine clarity look that you want, and you don't have to worry about editing a lot of noise in post. Now, using this in the studio, I used the small modifier. So I didn't use the 60-inch umbrella, to save power. I used the small, softbox, and this saved a lot of power. Got higher f-stops. I did some headshots, did some shots with some bubbles, all these other different things, and these are the results that I got. Now, not once have I had to charge it. Not once have I had to do a worldly difference. Just put it on a light stand, put the modifier on there, cut it on, fire up my trigger, fire up my camera, go. No noise. Well, not much noise, not much noticeable noise, because that 600 just blows all that noise away if you have the right settings. I use 2 lights. Got this nice backlight, blue light, red light. She had a nice crown, headshots, all these other things, big modifiers.
So we came back to the studio to finish up the review for the Flashpoint Explorer 600, and Irina did an amazing job doing various different outfits and working, spotlighting this light, the Flashpoint Explorer 600. And I gotta say, there's only one more quirk that I wanna talk about in this review, and that is the modeling lamp here on the Flashpoint Explorer 600. They give you about 3 stages. Now, to understand the modeling lamp, you have to understand the situation that we have going on here under the hood. So inside of here, we have the flash tube. Now, the LED is the actual modeling lamp. It's a chip on board LED, and that means it's inside of the unit. That means if you take your flash tube out, the LED will still illuminate for the modeling lamp. It will not fire a strobe. It will be an LED on the inside. The flash tube is actually on the outside. We already talked about the flash tube and how vulnerable it is when you go to take it out the case. Now, let's see how powerful this LED is for the modeling lamp. We get 3 stages, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Now on video that might look kind of powerful because I haven't metered for one light here in the studio, but this lamp, when it comes to taking pictures and seeing the modeling lamp illuminate on your subject's face, it's not that strong at all. Even though they give you 3 different modes. That might be a selling tactic that they use. If we got 3 different modes or 3 different levels of flash, we have 3 different levels of modeling lamp. No, it's pretty dark, even at its most maximum modeling lamp level. Now, again, it is hard to actually have a subject look directly into the light when the modeling lamp is on. But when you put a modifier on this and you start loading this thing down with some heavy Bowens mount adapters and Bowens mount this, that, and the other, you will not see the modeling lamp flashing through there. Just like inside, we can use this thing wirelessly, but you still have that power and that flexibility on your exposure. So exposing inside the studio is different from exposing outside. So now, instead of being at maybe 2.8, doing some buttery background bokeh images, we're now at apertures of f11, f9, f8 to get all of the model in focus and have them on a backdrop. I just did a simple plain backdrop, maybe a fill light here and there, rim light here and there. I'm not doing anything too extravagant because I'm also filming myself. I'm the only one filming, and that's how I had to do it. All in all, guys, the Flashpoint Xplor 600 is a beast of a light. Even if you get the regular one, even if you get the first version, the non-pro version, even if you get the manual one, even if you get the ETTL version. I have both manual and ETTL versions. It's also modular. You can attach some extension heads on there and get a totally different result or more power out of it. You can boom it overhead. You can do a lot of other things. You don't even have to plug it up into the wall. As a matter of fact, all I got to do is take it out, put it on the stand, put the modifier on it, fire it up, and we're all good to go. I've been photographing for about 16 years, and I have to say that this is probably one of the most important pieces of flash photography that you can get on the market today. And the reason why I say that is because when I started photography, the only thing you had for an outdoor flash at a reasonable price was a speed light. And the speed lights, they don't have enough power. They can do high-speed sync, but for how long? Because that takes about, what, 2 stops of light for every flash that it does because of how high-speed sync works. But when this came out, not only was this built to be outside, it's wireless. You don't have to have 4 AA batteries that you're changing that get hot in the speed light every 3 minutes. This is made to not only dump a lot of power out, but it's made to actually high-speed sync outside and do a whole bunch of other things with a lot of battery capacity to boot. Like, this thing never dies. So that means not only can you use it with high-speed sync, you can put large modifiers on it to get lighting setups and high-quality lighting that you wouldn't have otherwise. I mean, in the past 10 years, flash photography has really boosted up. I want to say in the past 6 years, because I got this about 3 years ago. But nevertheless, when a unit like this first came out, I think a company called Pro Studio or Pro Photo came out with it. Pro Photo came out with the first unit of these, and their unit was so expensive. I'm like, how am I supposed to be able to afford that? So usually it's not the most expensive thing on the market that gets the attention of the masses, it's the most affordable version of that expensive thing that gets the attention of the masses, like the iPhone or the Kodak Brownie. Not only does this have its own version, but it also has a Pro version that has all the upgraded features of this unit at different prices. And not only that, Flashpoint has an assortment of different products that has less power for less money. So if you can't afford this one, you can get the one under it, you can get the one under it, you can work your way up. But 600 watt seconds with high-speed ATTL, if you buy that version, you don't have to break the bank, so to speak. to get what you need. You can finance this, you can do a whole bunch of other things to get this unit. That's why this unit is so important, because it's one of the first in its class at the price point that it's at. And not only that, it has younger brothers and sisters and more powerful brothers and sisters in its lineup that can give you similar results. Why buy the Flashpoint Xplor 600? It's because it is the cheap man's powerhouse for flashes. It just does it for me. It does it for anybody who buys it. It's an amazing product. If you do portraits, if you do events, you need to be looking at this flash. If you do anything else, you may not need this flash, but portraits and events, and portraits is probably the most important genre, most popular genre in photography, get this unit because you're going to love it, I promise you. The build quality in reference to what it's giving you and the price it's at, even get a used version. If it works, if it's certified, it's going to not let you down. So this is a way just to keep you safe so your flash tube won't fall out of the unit and you're all good to go. All right, so another thing to think about with this Flashpoint Xplor 600 is this knob. This knob is only like 10 to 12 bucks, but it will snap off. And the reason why I say this is because when you tighten it up, when you start to hear that noise, you really want to stop. But some modifiers need a little bit more tightening because they're so heavy, and it makes this unit so front heavy. So this knob has the tendency to break. The screw that you use to tighten umbrellas in can strip really easily, and it's not easy to find this umbrella screw. So if you ever put an umbrella in there and the shaft of the umbrella is really, really dense, like those old school umbrellas, and you tighten it up, you can strip out this screw extremely easy. You can only use new modern umbrellas that have thin tubing in it, so when it goes to grab it, it's not stripping out the screw. So in review, the things that break on this unit are the knobs here, the screw here, the knob on this side, the one that you use to crank it and keep it in place. Also the flash tube here, it breaks if it slides out, that's $100. The knob is $12. The screw that tightens the umbrellas, you can't find those anywhere, but I'm pretty sure that's like $10 if you find it. That's pretty much all that breaks. I mean, after having it for about 4 years, 3 or 4 years, I haven't had many things that broke on here or anything to break on here that hasn't allowed me to just purchase it again and put it back on. Oh, and this thing breaks too. It's about $12. This is the default dish that they give you with the unit. So make sure you're ready to replace any of these things, and you might actually want to have some extras on hand, especially this knob. It's only 12 bucks. Just go ahead and buy it. I thought that when I first bought this unit, I would need to buy a spare battery just in case it went down. I actually, even after 3 years of usage, have never found that to be the case. I have never needed to buy another battery. Also, this flash tubes do degrade in their color accuracy over time. Even if this doesn't have 100% color accuracy straight out of the box, the flash tube will still degrade whatever it comes out with initially. So you're gonna have to eventually buy another flash tube if you find that white balancing and color accuracy is an issue in your photo shoot from shot to shot.
Now this chart simply has the power readings of the 1200B, that's the two flash points put together, and then the Xplor by itself, the 600, just as one unit. Now as you can see how they line up, like I told you, at max power, it is not a whole stop difference. That's what you would be looking for, a whole stop difference, but I can see the Flashpoint is a little bit stronger if it's really rated at 600 watt seconds, and that means the 1200 watt seconds that you're getting is not exactly 1200 watt seconds. So you can see that here on this chart. Also here on the right two columns, I give you some speed readings. Now the 1200 watt second light at its maximum power, it kind of equals out with the 600 at its maximum power, and they pretty much duel each other on recycle times. The only difference is the 1200 watt second at every equivalent power setting or interval gives you more power. So it essentially gives you more power and recycles faster if you combine the two 600s, as you would think. But it just doesn't give you the maximum power that you would think out of a 1200 watt second light because of the cable, how it loses power over the length of that cable. These are my exposure equivalence charts for the Flashpoint 600. Now, the Flashpoint 600 was measured 4 feet away from my light meter. Now, for those of you who do not know how a light meter works, you essentially set it up at the exposure that you want, which would encompass shutter speed and ISO, and then you would hit the button and let the flash, and it reads the f-stop that your flash would need to be set at to get the proper exposure on your subject. Now, as far as shutter speed, I chose 1/125th of a second, and as far as shutter speed, that's pretty standard. I think you could use it in some situations, but not all situations, and you're more likely to get a nice shot of a posed subject that way if you have them still at 1/125th of a second, and that's why I chose that. Now, the ISO is going to be varied from 100 to 25,600, and that's pretty standard for most newer pro cameras that you can find on the market today. Now, the f-stop, like I said before, is measured from the flash being at 4 feet away from the light meter. Now, with all that being said, at maximum power, at 1/125th of a second, ISO 100, at 4 feet away from the light meter, we're reading an f32.7. That is an astounding amount of power, and Flashpoint/Godox says this is 600 watt seconds worth of power. And as you can see, as we go down the chart, you can see it at 1/3 stop increments going down. So you got ISO 100, 1/125th, 1/160th, and so on and so forth. So those are 1/3 stop increments, just like your camera is usually default set to. Now, all the way at the lowest power, we have it at the lowest power. The power for the Flashpoint 600 is 1/250th or 1/256th of power, and it's at 1/125th of a second, and ISO 25,600, and you're getting an f-stop of f2.07. And for those of you who like to shoot shallow depth of field and things of that nature, you're starting to understand how much power it's offering you at maximum power in reference to the lowest power. Now, the Flashpoint 600 boasts high-speed syncing capabilities. Now, high-speed sync is extremely powerful and useful for photographers that do portraiture in the bright sun outside. Now, high-speed sync absorbs a lot of power from your unit. That's why you need a flashing unit that is extremely powerful like the Flashpoint 600, and that's why this is such a powerful feature, because it can handle high-speed sync. Now, you can see here at varying ISOs and varying powers that at 1/500th of a second, you still can meter at about an f11.9. That's almost f16 at 1/500th of a second, ISO 100. Now, if you go all the way down, you'll find out that the Flashpoint 600 can give you 1/8 power, a shutter speed of 1/500th of a second, 5.6 at ISO 100. Now, at the bottom of the chart, you got 400 ISO, which boasts f11 at 1/500th of a second at 8th power and high speed sync. Now, the reason we test high speed sync at higher ISO values is because when you start to use high speed sync, you'll notice that the high speed sync drains a whole bunch of battery power, because it's not just flashing one flash, it's pulsating flashes, almost as if it's light painting your subject, so your flash could actually sync at higher sync speeds. So this takes a lot of power from your flash, so raising your ISO will take the strain off of your flash, and the higher you raise your ISO, the less the flash has to dish out as much power as it is to achieve that high speed sync exposure. Now, this is the Flashpoint 600's meter readings as it theoretically would be in watt seconds. And the reason why I made this chart is because you have to understand that the other lights that it's competing with, or the other lights that are in its lineup, are also measured in watt seconds. Now, I know what you're going to say in the comments. Watt seconds are not, theoretically equivalent to each other, but this will give us an idea of what they're saying, because if half power is half power, then if 600 watt seconds is full power, then you have to think that 300 watt seconds is half power, so on and so forth. So if that's the case, then the Flashpoint 300 or the Evolve 200 or the 400 watt second light that they have will give you readings based off of what this flash can do at lower powers. So basically, the lower it gets, it's going to fall in the range of some of those other watt-second lights that you have. And then you can compare and contrast whether it's worth it to get this 600 watt-second over those lower watt-second units. Does that make sense? Theoretically, I put some watt-second power ratings here to kind of get you in the feel and idea of what this flash can do in comparison to the other flashes in the lineup. The Flashpoint 600 can be used in a lot of different ways. And one of the biggest aces up its sleeve is that you can combine 2 units into an extension head and make 1200 watt-seconds of power. So essentially, combining 2 600s gives you 1200 watt-seconds of power, right? But in my measurements, the 1200 didn't quite get there. All right, so you have about 45 F45, and then you have it over half power, which is 32.7. Well, 32.7 is really where the Flashpoint 600 left off, which means that this is not quite 1200 watt-seconds of difference. Now, if you round it down, then yes, it is a whole stop difference, which means it will be a 1200, but it's not exactly as far apart as the advertisement will lead you to believe, which means the Flashpoint 1200 extension head is not exactly 1200 watt-seconds. Now, this is because of the fact that you take these flash tubes away from the models and then you use a cable to then combine it. But that cable is very long and it's not very high gauge, which means you lose power through that cable because it's so long. So one of its biggest advantages is one of its biggest detriments, because you can't use that 1200 watt-seconds at 1200 watt-seconds. But I will tell you that it does recycle just about as fast as the 600 watt-second does, and it does give you a lot more power. So here you can see my theoretical watt-seconds. Once again, that 1200 is not really 1200, but you would see where 600 falls in. You would see where 300 and 150 watt-seconds and 75 watt-seconds, so on and so forth. Because now you have little lights that are like 100 watt-seconds that can compare to this 1200 watt-seconds. Then you can kind of see where they measure in and see what you're willing to spend versus the pros and cons of both lights. So what have we learned from these charts? We've learned that the 600 watt-second light, even at high speed sync, is an extremely powerful light that can be used well in a studio and outdoors, just like it advertises. We also know that it can use different flashes to be combined for a bigger flash output in the 1200B head. It also can be extended with a 600 head. But we know that once we extend it with that long cable, that long cable will absorb a lot of power transmission from that light, which means that 1200B head that you want all that power from is not actually 1200 watt-seconds. And it also means that if you want to split these two lights off like I do and use 2 600s for a more dynamic lighting situation instead of one big 1200 watt-second light, then you might want to do that and save yourself the money on the 1200 head. You can also use that 1200 not just to blast a whole bunch of light, but to use it at higher powers than 600 at lower efficiencies. So for example, 600 watt-seconds would be roughly somewhere around half power for the 1200, making it recycle faster, giving you a lot more flashes and not slowing your shooting process down.
Stay tuned for the next video, guys, because I'll probably be showing you guys how to use high-speed sync. It's now starting to warm up. Spring, summer, fall. This light can do it all. Stay tuned for the next video.